welcome back to Wonder Faith. I'm Anthony Bush, and today I want to talk about something a little unique, a little different than what I usually do. So, as of filming this, yesterday was September 11th, 2019, and it marked the 18-year anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, on the Pentagon, and of course, the crashes in Pennsylvania that were said to be headed for Washington, D.C. And it took me a while to come to make this video because it's something that's very difficult for me to think and talk about. But I felt like it was right that I did talk about it because I think so much can be learned from that tragedy that happened all those years ago. So firstly, I want to say I was 3 the year that the attacks occurred. I did not cognitively remember them. My parents didn't talk about it much. They apparently they acted like everything was normal and they didn't want to tell me that at such a young age. So I don't remember the attacks themselves. But every year, whenever I did learn about them, I took the time out on September 11th every year to study the attacks, to study people's reactions to them and the pain and hardship that came with that great loss. And so I just want to talk about my own contemplations about it because I think so much can be understood when we think about it. And it's hard to, it's painful to, but through the pain we come to understand things and it helps us to be better people. Firstly, I want to say as very sternly as possible, when you look at that day, when you see the actions that human beings decided to do, that they could bring themselves to steal a plane and sacrifice themselves so that many more can die by the result of their actions. And when you see this happening before your eyes in New York City, the people who saw that, and I've heard people say how they couldn't understand, they couldn't cognitively bring themselves to understand that people could do this of their own free will. And so when we look at everything that came from that, all the suffering and the damage, not just physical damage to buildings, the damage to people's lives, who lost their children, their parents, when you look at the magnitude of that, and you don't just see it as numbers on a page, but you let it seep into your person that these people are gone. These people died and they weren't given a choice. They sacrificed their lives without ever having another opportunity. That's whenever I say, I can't have you look me in the eye and tell me there's no evil in this world. That evil is just a construct, that evil is just something in our heads that we imagine or think up to understand the world around us. No. Such tragedy, such darkness, it emanates in us when we see that. It's not something that's just a buzzword that came about through history to help understand those we disagree with. No, evil exists. When a person can convince themselves that by killing themselves and others with them to destroy and kill more lives, then that's when we know that there's evil at play. Because they convinced themselves of that this is what the divine will was, that God wanted them to do this to get back at the United States, who was the great evil to avoid. That's the thing about evil. It's not like in the movies. Evil will not present itself as the guy with the mustache or like the obviously evil person who just wants to hurt people to hurt people. They usually have a reason behind it. They think they're doing the right thing. And by justifying it to themselves, they can then bring themselves to do atrocious things like kill millions. Similarly with the Third Reich, Hitler, through his ideas of purity and bringing back a strong German nation, he was able to justify killing the Jewish people, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and other what were undesired by him and his vision. So this is not just an act. This is a grave evil that affected not just the United States, but the whole world. Because when evil happens, it isn't just a national ordeal. All of humanity shares in that pain because we've realized, oh my gosh, that is possible. Someone or a group of men can think and carry through this action. The evil capacity of the human person is no longer just an imagination, but has been extended to reality. And so even now, yesterday in New York City, you had many of relatives and people who lost friends and family on that day come together and mourn again, because it doesn't just go away. Evil's never just a one-time thing. It happens, it does its destruction, and then forever people are scarred by it. They have to live with the reality that their loved one is gone, and they didn't have a chance to say goodbye, most of them. I can imagine the children who didn't have a mother or father because someone deprived them of that. Otherwise, they could have had a family that isn't broken, but because someone decided to make a stand or make a message by killing so many people, they've given innocent children a life that is broken. So when we're faced with the reality of evil, when people stare at the towers and there's nothing they can do, all they can do is stare in despair and watch before their eyes as people suffer. There's a lack of control, and that lack of control makes us feel even worse because there's nothing we can do about it. We can just stare as the buildings burn and people die. It's not easy. But the first step is we have to see it for what it is, which is an act of evil that has damaged the lives of thousands, if not millions. But what do we do with that? Do we let it win? Do we just accept that evil exists and then move on with our lives and hope that we don't come in the path of it? I would say absolutely not. People, you wonder, and many wonder why I talk about religion and God all the time. Like, why do I stay on these topics? Well, here's why. I don't just do it so I feel good or so that I can skip around in daisies. It is because we see the reality of evil in the world. We see the destruction if human beings are convinced to act in that way. The animalistic, horrid selfishness that costs thousands, if not millions of lives. And there must be a response. Because even though there is that great capacity for evil, there is also the great capacity for the good. And I talked about that all the time, and that's why I talk about it, because we know the horrid evils that humans are capable of. And just as great as those are, just how huge and unbelievable they are, there's also the great ability for the good to come out as well. And that is what we saw after the attacks. The city of New York, the state of New York, and the United States, along with the world, came together and responded. They picked up the wreckage, they mourned for those lost, and they comforted one another. They forgot themselves for those moments, for that year before things returned to normal. They forgot about themselves and said, others need us now. I am going to give of myself to my community to heal what I can. It may never be enough to fix it completely. It'll never be the same again, but at least we can look evil in the face and say, even though you may try to deprive of us of happiness and good, we will not let it happen. We audaciously stand against it. And that's what we are to do in our own lives. It's not just about the facts on a piece of paper or what happened, X, Y, and Z. No, there is a greater understanding. There is the chance that you and I can overcome it. We can see the evil in the world and we can cry and mourn about it. We can ignore it because it makes us feel bad. We can do all these things to serve ourselves. But the greater thing is we can act against it. We can tell people about how good is possible. We can inspire them. We can do the good ourselves. We can volunteer in our communities. We can mourn with those who mourn. Basically, we can do the Beatitudes and the corporal works of mercy. And that is how we fight back. Because God allows us to. We're not alone. It isn't just evil's there and that's it. No, we have a fighting chance, and that is what time is about now. That is what history is now about. Are we going to be better as a people, or are we going to be worse as a people? Are we going to only satisfy what is good for us materialistically, or are we going to put others before ourselves? I think 9/11, a horrible tragedy shows us both great extremes. It shows us the evil that can be done, but also the good that comes after it. And some people might be angry or frustrated, like, why did this happen? And some may even be angry at God, like, why would God allow such an action? And in the end of the day, I say to that, it's because of free will. I always have posited that free will is an act of love. God cannot force us to love him. He cannot force us to be good. He must allow us to choose to love him and do the good. And so there has to be the ability to allow for the evil in the world. And yes, it can be quite evil, unimaginably so, but we can choose otherwise. We can be good. Yesterday, I listened to the phone calls and things, and I hear the tragedy, the unbelievableness in their voices of the victims, of the loved ones who are trying to contact those who are in the towers. And it seems so unnatural. It's like, this isn't supposed to happen. This was never supposed to happen, right? That's what we're telling ourselves, and yet it did. Because we know deep down that we are supposed to be good, that we are supposed to just do what we're supposed to and not hurt other people. But it happened. It can happen. And once we finally understand and accept that reality, we can understand that we have a place to oppose it. Don't just stay in your box, I beg you. Don't just worry about your own needs and work your job and get the money you need to survive and be successful. No, there's so much more to life than that. There is the great reality. We call it spiritual warfare in the church. There's evil, there's good, and there's the fight in between. And no, not everyone is pure evil or pure good. None of us are. We're constantly battling ourselves to do good or bad. We have to fight our own instincts almost. And so we have our own battles internally. I understand that. But there's also the greater reality, the battle in the world, and our place in it. And so if it's taught us anything year after year, it should make us more resolute that I know what happened that day, and I can't forget that. Even though I wasn't there, it still hurts me. But from that hurt, I strive to be good, to serve others, and be better. I want to be a better Anthony tomorrow than I am today, and better the next and the next. And we can do it. Hope will hold us together. Never despair. Even when it gets bad, don't despair. As long as you have your family, your friends, and God, there is no ceiling. We can continue upward. But don't let it take another tragedy for you to realize that. Don't let more atrocities harm you without you knowing that you can do something about it with the help of God and faith. I'll see you next time. That's basically all I wanted to talk about, and I hope that we can all get behind this together and you become united just in this one fact that we can be good and can turn against the evils of the world. May God be with you. May you find final victory in Christ.